My beloved child. Don't skip. There is a reason these words have reached you at this exact moment, because something that remained hidden inside this love story is finally beginning to surface. And when you hear what your soulmate's mother discovered, you may understand why certain things happened in ways that never made sense before. Stay till the end, because the confrontation was only the beginning. Something huge is waiting for you. For a long time, there was one question surrounding this connection. What really happened? How could two people who once felt so naturally drawn toward each other suddenly become distant? How could something that carried so much possibility become filled with hesitation, confusion, silence, and unanswered questions? And most importantly, who changed everything? Your soulmate's mother had wondered about this longer than anyone realized. At first, she stayed quiet. She watched. She listened. She noticed the little changes in her child's behavior. There were days when your soulmate seemed completely normal on the outside, yet something behind their eyes had changed. Their laughter did not last as long. Their conversations became shorter. Whenever certain subjects came up, they would suddenly become quiet. But there was one subject that created the strongest reaction. You. Whenever someone accidentally mentioned your name, your soulmate would pause. Only for a second. But mothers notice seconds like that. She noticed how their expression changed. She noticed how they sometimes looked away. She noticed the strange mixture of affection, regret, and unfinished emotion that appeared whenever memories of you entered the room. And slowly, she began asking herself a question she could no longer ignore. If they truly stopped caring, why does this still affect them? Don't skip. Because that question eventually led her toward a conversation nobody expected her to have. There was someone connected to the story who knew far more than they had ever admitted. Someone whose words had influenced decisions. Someone whose opinions had quietly created doubts. Someone who had been present around the exact time everything between you and your soulmate started changing. And your soulmate's mother had begun putting the pieces together. One memory at a time. One conversation at a time. One contradiction at a time. Until something finally became impossible to dismiss. The story she had originally been told did not match what she was seeing. And once a mother realizes that someone she loves may have made an important decision based on incomplete information, she does not easily forget it. For weeks, she said nothing. That silence was not weakness. She was observing. She wanted to understand before speaking. She remembered conversations from months ago. She remembered comments that had seemed innocent at the time. She remembered how this person had repeatedly spoken about you with certainty, even though they barely knew what had truly happened between you and your soulmate. And then she remembered one particular sentence. A sentence that suddenly sounded completely different. The person had once told your soulmate something that planted doubt. Not an obvious accusation. Not something dramatic. Something subtle. Something that sounded almost protective. They had made your soulmate question whether your feelings were as genuine as they appeared. That tiny doubt became another doubt. Then another. And once uncertainty entered the connection, every small misunderstanding began looking bigger than it really was. Your soulmate started overthinking your silence. You may have started questioning theirs. Things that could have been solved through one honest conversation remained unspoken. And slowly, Two people began standing farther apart while both secretly wondering why the other person was no longer coming closer. But your soulmate's mother finally saw the pattern. And what happened next changed everything. Stay till the end. Because the answer she received when she confronted this person was not the answer she expected. Something huge is waiting for you. The confrontation did not happen in some dramatic crowded room. There was no audience. No performance. It happened privately. Quietly. And that made it even more powerful. Your soulmate's mother had reached the point where pretending not to notice was no longer possible. She approached this person calmly. At first, the conversation sounded ordinary. A few normal words. A few harmless questions. But underneath those questions was something much deeper. She was testing the story. And the person did not realize it. Not yet. She asked about the past. They answered quickly. She asked another question. They answered again. Then she asked about something specific. A detail. Something they had previously said. And suddenly, there was hesitation. Just a fraction of a second. But she caught it. The answer changed slightly. Your soulmate's mother did not interrupt. She simply listened. Because sometimes the truth becomes easier to recognize when you allow someone enough room to contradict themselves. Then came another question. And another. The person became uncomfortable. Their explanation became longer. And that was when your soulmate's mother realized something. They were no longer explaining what happened. They were defending themselves. There is a difference. And she heard it. Don't skip now. This is where the story begins turning. She finally looked directly at this person and asked the question she had been holding inside for weeks. Why did you interfere? Silence. No immediate answer. Your soulmate's mother waited. The person looked surprised. Perhaps they had believed nobody would ever connect the dots. Perhaps they thought enough time had passed. Perhaps they believed your soulmate would simply move forward and nobody would ever ask what had actually happened. But mothers remember when their children change. And she had remembered everything. She repeated the question. This time, more slowly. Why did you interfere between them? The person tried to avoid answering. They said they were only trying to help. Your soulmate's mother did not accept that. She asked another question. If you were helping, why did you never encourage them to speak directly? Again. Silence. And that silence told her more than the explanation that followed. The person finally admitted that they had doubts about you. They claimed they believed your soulmate would eventually get hurt. They claimed they were trying to protect them. They claimed they thought separation would be easier than allowing the relationship to become deeper. But your soulmate's mother noticed something important. Every explanation began with the same idea. I thought. Not, I knew. Not, I saw. Not, they told me. I thought. Assumptions. That was what had influenced everything. And your soulmate's mother suddenly understood the tragedy of it. A meaningful connection had been judged through assumptions instead of truth. Two hearts had been separated by conclusions that were never properly tested. But this was still not the shocking answer. Stay with me. Something bigger was coming. Your soulmate's mother asked one final question. A question so direct that the person could no longer hide behind explanations. She asked, "Did you actually know something about them, or did you simply not want them together?" The room became still. The person looked away. And for the first time, their confidence disappeared. Your soulmate's mother waited. Seconds passed. Then came the answer. No. She frowned. No what? The person swallowed their pride and finally admitted. I didn't know anything for certain. That sentence changed the entire conversation. Your soulmate's mother stared at them. Everything became clear. All those warnings. All those opinions. All those moments when your soulmate had been encouraged to question you. None of it had been based on certainty. The person had never possessed some hidden truth about you. They had interpreted things. Assumed things. Predicted things. And your soulmate had listened because they trusted them. But then your soulmate's mother asked something even deeper. If you knew nothing for certain, why were you so determined? And this was the answer that shocked her. The person became quiet before finally saying something your soulmate's mother had never expected. Because I was afraid they would choose that relationship over everything else. Your soulmate's mother froze. Now she understood. This had never entirely been about you. It had been about fear. The person had been afraid of losing their influence over your soulmate. Afraid things would change. Afraid your soulmate would begin making decisions differently. Afraid that if your connection became serious, their place in your soulmate's life might become smaller. It was not some great secret about you. It was insecurity. And suddenly, the entire past looked different. Don't skip. Because your soulmate's mother did something next that nobody expected. She did not shout. She did not create chaos. She simply said, "Do you understand what your fear may have cost them?" The person had no answer. And your soulmate's mother continued. She spoke about the months she had watched her child pretending everything was fine. She spoke about the nights when your soulmate seemed distracted. She spoke about how they had tried to move forward while some invisible part of them remained emotionally connected to something unfinished. Then she said something that made the person finally lower their eyes. You convinced them to be afraid of something they should have been allowed to understand for themselves. That sentence remained in the room. Because it was true. Your soulmate had never been given the freedom to discover the full truth naturally. Instead, doubt had entered first. And once doubt enters a relationship, it can disguise itself as wisdom. It whispers, "Maybe I should protect myself. Maybe they don't really care. Maybe I should leave before I'm left. Maybe silence means rejection." And suddenly two people who might simply need one honest conversation begin protecting themselves from each other. Your soulmate's mother finally understood this. But what she did not know was that this confrontation would soon reach your soulmate. And when it did, everything they believed about the ending would begin changing. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate's mother left that conversation carrying an emotion she could not easily describe. Part of her was frustrated. Part of her was saddened. But another part of her felt strangely relieved. Because now she had confirmation that the story was not as simple as everyone had believed. You had not simply disappeared from your soulmate's heart. Your soulmate had not simply stopped caring. There had been interference. There had been fear. There had been assumptions. And most importantly, there had been things left unsaid. Later that evening, your soulmate noticed something different about their mother. She was quieter than usual. Your soulmate asked whether everything was okay. She said yes. But mothers sometimes say yes while deciding how to tell you something that could change the way you understand your own past. Your soulmate noticed. What happened? She looked at them. For a moment, she considered saying nothing. Maybe reopening the past would hurt. Maybe your soulmate had finally learned to live with the distance. Maybe some doors were better left closed. But then she remembered the confrontation. She remembered the admission. I didn't know anything for certain. And she realized something. Silence had already caused enough damage. So she made a decision. She sat down. And she said, I need to tell you something about what happened between you and that person. Your soulmate immediately knew who she meant. You. Their expression changed. That same expression she had noticed so many times. The guarded look. The sudden stillness. The emotional wall. Your soulmate tried to dismiss it. There's nothing to talk about. But their mother knew better. If there was nothing to talk about, you wouldn't look like that every time they are mentioned. Your soulmate said nothing. And then she revealed the confrontation. Every question. Every hesitation. Every contradiction. And finally, the confession. Your soulmate listened without interrupting. At first, they looked skeptical. Then confused. Then something deeper appeared. Regret. Because suddenly they were remembering things too. They remembered moments when they had almost contacted you but changed their mind. They remembered conversations where they had accepted someone else's interpretation instead of asking you directly. They remembered times when your actions had been misunderstood. They remembered how many decisions had been made from fear instead of clarity. And the most painful realization was simple. What if they had been wrong? Don't skip. Because this is where your soulmate's heart began asking questions their mind had avoided for a very long time. What if your silence had not meant what they thought? What if your distance had been a response to theirs? What if you had been waiting for them while they believed you had already moved on? What if both of you had been standing behind separate walls, each believing the other had built the first one? Your soulmate's mother watched these thoughts move across their face. Then she said quietly, "You should have spoken to them yourself." Your soulmate looked down. "I know." 2 words. But those 2 words carried months of emotion. "I know." Your soulmate's mother asked, "Do you still think about them?" No answer. She did not need one. Sometimes silence is confession enough. Then your soulmate finally said something unexpected. "I tried not to." Not, "No." Not, "I'm over it." "I tried not to." And their mother understood. This was not a story your soulmate had forgotten. It was a story they had tried to bury. There is a difference. Something unfinished had remained beneath everything. And now, because of one confrontation, the ground covering it had been removed. Stay till the end. Because what your soulmate revealed next surprised even their mother. Your soulmate admitted there had been moments when they almost reached out to you. More than once. They had opened conversations. Written words. Deleted them. Started again. Stopped again. Not because they had nothing to say. Because they had too much to say. How do you explain months of silence? How do you say, I may have misunderstood you? How do you admit, I allowed someone else's fear to influence what I believed about us? How do you return to someone after convincing yourself that walking away was the right decision? Your soulmate did not know. So they remained quiet. And from your side, that silence may have looked like indifference. But inside them, the story was far more complicated. Their mother asked, what stopped you? Your soulmate answered, I didn't know whether they would want to hear from me. And there it was. The second wall. Fear of rejection. Your soulmate was no longer only afraid that the relationship could hurt them. Now they were afraid that too much time had passed. Afraid you had changed. Afraid you had healed. Afraid that reaching out might disturb a peace you had built without them. But their mother said something your soulmate was not prepared to hear. You cannot decide someone else's answer before giving them the chance to speak. That sentence struck deeply. Because that was exactly how this story had gone wrong in the first place. Other people had decided what you supposedly felt. Your soulmate had decided what your silence supposedly meant. You may have decided what their distance supposedly meant. Everyone had interpretations. But where had the conversation been? Where had the truth been? Where had two people simply sat with honesty and said, this is what I felt. This is what hurt. This is what I misunderstood. This is what I wish I had said. That conversation had never happened. And suddenly your soulmate understood why the story never felt complete. Because perhaps it never truly received an ending. It received an interruption. Don't skip now. Something huge is waiting for you. That night, your soulmate could not stop thinking about the past. Old memories returned differently. They remembered your kindness. Your patience. Little things you did that seemed ordinary then but carried meaning now. The way you remembered details. The way certain conversations felt effortless. The way you could sometimes understand their mood without needing a long explanation. And then came the difficult memories. The moment communication changed. The moment uncertainty entered. The moment they began listening more closely to outside opinions than to their own experience with you. And your soulmate realized something uncomfortable. There had been signs that the outside story did not completely match reality. But fear had made those signs easy to ignore. Now those memories were returning one by one. And one question became impossible to escape. What if I walked away from something real because I was afraid of something that never happened? Your soulmate sat with that question. Minutes passed. Then they reached for their phone. Your name was still there. Maybe in an old conversation. Maybe somewhere they had deliberately avoided looking. But there you were. One tap away. And suddenly the distance between you did not feel like months or miles. It felt like one decision. One message. One moment of courage. Their finger hovered. They started typing. Then stopped. Deleted it. Started again. Their heart was telling them to speak. Their fear was telling them to wait. And somewhere between those two voices was the truth they had been avoiding. They still cared. But before they could decide what to do, something else happened. Their mother returned. She had one more thing to tell them. One detail from the confrontation she had intentionally saved until the end. And this detail changed your soulmate's expression completely. Stay till the end. Do not look away from this moment. Because this is where the person who interfered made an admission that went even deeper. Your soulmate's mother said, "There's something else they told me." Your soulmate looked up. What? She hesitated. Then she revealed it. The person who had interfered admitted that after the separation, they eventually realized they had misjudged the situation. They had seen your soulmate become quieter. They had noticed that moving away from you had not created the happiness they expected. They had realized their advice had not brought peace. And there had even been moments when they considered telling your soulmate the truth. But they did not. Why? Pride. They were afraid to admit they might have been wrong. They feared your soulmate would blame them. So instead of correcting the misunderstanding, they stayed silent. Your soulmate stared at their mother. Now the story was no longer merely about an old mistake. Someone had realized the mistake and still allowed the misunderstanding to continue. That was the part that shocked them. Because perhaps things could have been repaired earlier. Perhaps months of confusion could have been avoided. Perhaps one honest sentence could have changed everything. Your soulmate asked. They knew? Their mother nodded. They eventually suspected they had been wrong. Your soulmate looked away. And something shifted. Not toward anger. Toward clarity. For the first time, they stopped asking why you had not saved the connection. They stopped asking why you had not fought harder. They stopped assuming your distance meant you did not care. Instead, they asked a new question. What did they experience from their side? That question matters. Because for the first time, your soulmate was trying to see the story through your eyes. Imagine what you may have seen. Someone becoming distant without fully explaining why. Someone changing their behavior. Someone perhaps giving mixed signals. Someone pulling away while you were left trying to understand what you had done. Maybe you eventually stopped reaching because you were protecting your dignity. Maybe you decided love should not require chasing someone who had chosen silence. Maybe you were hurting too. Your soulmate had rarely allowed themselves to consider that possibility. Now they could not avoid it. And suddenly their regret became deeper. Because they realized you may have believed you were the one who had been rejected. While they had spent all this time believing the same thing about you. Two people. One misunderstanding. Two versions of the same heartbreak. And neither knew the complete story. Something huge is waiting for you. Because after that realization, your soulmate made a decision. Not necessarily to rush. Not to force an outcome. Not to pretend the past never happened. Something more mature. They decided they wanted the truth. Whatever that truth might be. If you no longer felt the same, they wanted to respect that. If you had moved forward, they wanted to understand. But if there was even a possibility that both of you had misunderstood what happened, they could no longer live comfortably with never knowing. Their mother saw the decision forming before they even spoke. You're going to contact them, aren't you? Your soulmate did not answer immediately. Then they said, I don't know. But this time, I don't know, did not mean no. It meant they were afraid. Their mother smiled gently. You don't have to know what happens next. You only have to be honest. And those words followed your soulmate long after the conversation ended. Be honest. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Not certain. Honest. Your soulmate returned to their phone. Your name was still there. They opened the old conversation. And something happened that they did not expect. They began scrolling. Old messages. Old jokes. Old moments. Tiny fragments of a connection that once felt alive. And suddenly they found something. A message from you. One they had interpreted completely differently at the time. They read it once. Then again. Then a third time. With everything they now knew, the meaning seemed different. What they once thought was distance now looked like hurt. What they once thought was indifference now looked like someone trying not to pressure them. And your soulmate whispered, I misunderstood. Don't skip. Because the next discovery made their hands go still. They found another message. Something you had said shortly before everything changed. A sentence they had forgotten. But now it carried enormous weight. You had essentially left the door open for honesty. You had given them an opportunity to speak. And they had not taken it. Because by then, someone else's fear was already living inside their thoughts. Your soulmate closed their eyes. The truth was becoming undeniable. This love story may not have collapsed because there was no love. It may have collapsed because communication disappeared at the exact moment it was needed most. And that realization changed something inside them. They stopped thinking about whether contacting you would make them look weak. They stopped thinking about pride. They stopped worrying about who should speak first. Because after enough time passes, who should speak first becomes far less important than, will anyone ever speak at all? They began typing again. This time, slowly. No grand declaration. No pressure. No promises. Just truth. But before sending it, they stopped. Because there was one final question they needed answered. They returned to their mother. Did they say anything else? Their mother became quiet. And your soulmate immediately knew. There was more. This is why I told you to stay till the end. Because something huge is waiting for you. Their mother had not revealed the final sentence from the confrontation. The person who interfered had said something just before the conversation ended. Something that changed the meaning of everything. Your soulmate asked again. What else did they say? Their mother looked directly at them. And finally answered. They said they believed the two of you would probably still be together if they had never interfered. Silence. Your soulmate did not move. That sentence landed differently from everything else. Because it came from the person who had once been so certain you were wrong for them. The same person who encouraged doubt. The same person whose fear influenced the separation. Now believed they had made a mistake. But your soulmate's mother was not finished. She said. And then they asked me something. What? They asked whether you still loved them. Your soulmate's expression changed. What did you say? Their mother answered. I told them that wasn't my question to answer. And suddenly your soulmate understood. Nobody else should answer that question anymore. Not their mother. Not the person who interfered. Not friends. Not assumptions. Not fear. If they wanted to know what you felt, there was only one person they should ask. You. That night, the unfinished message remained on their screen. Your soulmate read it repeatedly. Their finger hovered above send. Everything inside them was divided between fear and courage. Fear whispered, "What if it's too late?" Courage answered, "What if it isn't?" Fear whispered, "What if they don't respond?" Courage answered, "At least the truth will finally have a chance." Fear whispered, "What if everything has changed?" And something deeper answered, "Then let honesty reveal what remains." My child, remember something important in this fictional story: real love cannot be built on guessing what another person thinks. Healthy connection requires communication, mutual respect, freedom, and truth. No outside voice should replace an honest conversation between two people. And your soulmate was finally beginning to understand that. They were no longer searching for permission. They were searching for courage. Don't skip. Because there is still one piece missing. The confrontation exposed the interference. The confession exposed the fear. The mother exposed the truth. But there was still something your soulmate had never told anyone. Not their mother. Not the person who interfered. Perhaps not even themselves. Something about the final day before everything changed. A moment involving you that they had replayed secretly for months. And now, standing there with an unfinished message on their screen, they finally admitted what that moment truly meant. They had never wanted the story to end. They had wanted reassurance. They had wanted you to somehow understand what they were too afraid to explain. And when that reassurance did not arrive in exactly the way they expected, they interpreted it as an ending. But perhaps you were waiting for reassurance too. That realization nearly stopped them. Because suddenly the entire story looked like two people waiting for each other to cross the same bridge. Neither moved. Not because neither cared. Because both were afraid of crossing alone. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate looked once more at the message they had written. Then they added one final sentence. A sentence their mother had never suggested. A sentence nobody had placed in their mind. These were finally their own words. Their own choice. Their own truth. And for the first time since everything fell apart, there was no outside voice influencing what they were about to do. No assumptions. No interference. No pride. Just honesty. Their finger moved toward the screen. But before I tell you whether they pressed send, understand why this moment matters. The greatest revelation was never simply that someone interfered. It was that your soulmate finally recognized how much power they had given other people over something that should have been understood between you and them. And now they wanted that power back. Not power over you. Power over their own choices. The courage to ask instead of assume. The maturity to listen instead of predict. The humility to admit, I may have been wrong. Their mother had confronted the person who helped destroy the connection. But that confrontation awakened another confrontation. The one happening inside your soulmate. Between pride and truth. Between fear and vulnerability. Between the past they had accepted. And the possibility that the past had never been fully understood. And then, their phone lit up. Your soulmate stared at the screen. Their mother noticed the sudden change in their face. What happened? Your soulmate did not answer. They simply kept staring. Because something had appeared on that screen at the exact moment they were preparing to reach out. Something connected to you. Something they had not expected. And whatever it was made them whisper. No way. Their mother stepped closer. What is it? Your soulmate looked up, completely stunned. And then they said something that changed the atmosphere in the room. I think I finally know what I have to do. But what appeared on that screen? And what your soulmate decided to do immediately afterward? Is the part nobody around them saw coming. Don't skip what comes next. Stay till the end. Because the confrontation was only the first door opening. The next truth is about you. And something huge is waiting for you.